Today's project is going to be to make your own video filter. You're going to get to choose a video or a photo, or use your own webcam, and add different effects like noise, vignette, and tint to make a video filter like you'd see on Instagram, except to make it all on your own and to make it with code. We're going to be using JavaScript vocabulary, including functions, strings, and numbers. So what is JavaScript? What is this language that we're using? Well, JavaScript is a programming language. Computers aren't like humans. They can't read English, and if you just talk to them, they don't know what you're saying. They need really specific instructions to do what you want them to do. And those specific instructions are written in something called a programming language. So if you see this character here, she's using language that has things like parentheses, has things like semicolons, has things like equal signs, and that takes the things she wants the computer to do and gives it to a computer in the way that they understand. JavaScript is just one of the programming languages that we use to speak to computers. There are many out there, but it kind of doesn't matter which one you start with. JavaScript is a great language to start with because it's the language used on websites all around the internet. So when you learn JavaScript, you can make things like web pages, things that you can share really easily online and make really easily that will live online. Because computers aren't smart like you are, to get them to do what you want to do, you have to be really specific. You have to write code, which is called our input, to make something that gives us results, our output. This is similar to what we're going to be making today. We're going to be writing code that looks kind of like this and get an output that changes our video, and it'll look kind of like this. We're going to be using something called functions to make that happen. A function is an action in your code. You can think of it kind of like a verb. So if I told you to run or draw, I would be sending you functions. You can recognize a function by parentheses. So if you see here, we have tint, and then a parenthesis, the word red, and then a number. Because of these parentheses after the word tint, we know that it's a function. Invert is another example of a function. That doesn't have any words or numbers passed through because it only does one thing. It only flips the colors of our video. So functions can have arguments passed in them, things like red or a number, or not, but they're still functions. Sometimes a function will have empty parentheses. You see how invert doesn't have anything inside of it, but blur and text do? When something is inside the parentheses, you're passing something called an argument into your function. Things like the text, which we call a string, things like a number with blur 25, which will change the amount your video is blurred. A function can have one argument or many, and that'll make more sense once we start coding together. We're also going to be using something called strings. Strings are text in your code. When you use a number in JavaScript, you can just pass it in. The computer understands what a number is. If you say, I want my tint to be red, and I want it to be 50, like a number 50 powerful. It understands 50, but red isn't read so easily by the computer. Whenever you use a word like that, or a sentence that you recognize that looks like something you would say to a human, you have to put it in parentheses, and you're using something called a string. You can recognize strings because they start and end with quotation marks. I know that was a lot of new vocabulary, and it might have been a little bit confusing, but it'll all make sense once we start using it in our coding sandbox and seeing it in context. So with that, let's start coding. So let's start making our video filter. Remember, this is where we end up when we first make our VidCode class. I joined a class called Virtual Coding Club, but your club name will be whatever your parent or guardian set it to, or it'll just say your name if you signed up on your own, which is totally fine. To start, you're going to click Start Coding here. Let me give you a tour. If you go to Projects, you're going to see a gallery of projects that other people have made. Some of them are students, some of them are teachers. This is a great place to go for inspiration and to see what you're going to be making in the future. If you like a project, you can always open it up and press this Remix button to open it in the Coding Sandbox and make it your own. So that's the project gallery. If I go to My Classes, this is where I'm able to start the course, and Portfolio is where all the projects that I made will show up. To get started, click Start Coding. Now you're in the coding course. These are all of the tutorials that we're going to get through in Coding Club. They're all available to you for free, and they all teach different programming concepts. You also have access to starter projects, where you can make things like stop motion, make a Snapchat filter, make a news broadcast, and more. This is also where you can access the Coding Sandbox and code without a tutorial, kind of code in a more of an open setting. To start, we're going to create a filter. You can see up here in this account, I haven't done any of these tutorials yet. Let's go ahead and start. Welcome to the VidCode Sandbox. This is where you're going to be spending most of your time working on projects in VidCode. On the top left, you have the information on which tutorial you're in. You also have the option to save your project to keep working on it later and submit it. Once you submit it, you can share it with your friends and family. In every tutorial, you have instructions on the left that are going to walk you through each project, a big code editor in the middle, your final project that you're working on, it's a blank canvas right now, on the top right, and then your media gallery here on the bottom. This has backgrounds for your videos, graphics or stickers to add, and audio that you can add. You're able to upload your own music, upload your own videos, upload your own photos. To get started, I'm going to follow the instructions in purple here and click Next. It's going to prompt me to choose a video from backgrounds. I have the option to choose from the existing pictures and photos. I have the option to upload my own videos that I've taken, or I can record something directly from the webcam. This is something that I recorded earlier. I'm not going to use a video of myself though. I think for now I'm going to choose this dinosaur. So you see that some code has already appeared on my video, or like in my code editor, and my video has appeared here and replaced the blank canvas. I have movie.source equals video. That's one function. We talked about functions earlier. And I have movie.source equals dinosaur.mp4, which is in a string, and I can tell it's in a string because of these quotation marks. The cool thing about my code editor is that if I wanted to choose another video, I could pull it from here, but I can also type it directly in my code editor. And it'll update here in my project. I know what file something is called because it'll say it right under the video. So this one's arcade, this one's sleepycat.mp4, we have citysunset.mp4. So all I would have to do is type in the file name under that video and I'll be able to see it appear. I actually like City Sunset. I think I'm going to go with that. But if you're following along at home, you can choose any video that you want or upload your own. And just so you know, you can code any way that you want. If you learn better coding along with me, you're welcome to watch this and code at the same time. If you learn better watching and then going through it on your own, you're welcome to do that as well. Some instructions, some slides are going to prompt me to do things like that last one. Others are just going to tell me about my code. These are a little bit rarer, but they appear sometimes in the beginning. This slide is going over kind of what we already went over, that JavaScript is a programming language that looks just like this, and it's the programming language that talks to web pages. So now it's time to add my first effect. If you notice, this invert block appeared under the Effects tab. If you've ever used something like Scratch before, you're familiar with this idea of blocks that drag into your code and change it in some way. So let's see what happens when I drag in the invert block. And make sure that you're watching my video on the right. Bam! Crazy. So right away, switches all the colors. Black becomes white, orange becomes blue, etc., etc. And I get this really, really cool, really extreme effect with only one line of code. The difference between what you're doing on JavaScript or what you're doing on VidCode and what you're doing on something like Scratch is that here, this is real code. You can break it, and then you're going to get an error, and you can write it. So instead of dragging it in, just like with this, I could just write color invert, and it'll do the same thing. I have a lot of power here. This first tutorial in VidCode is going to start pretty slow. You're just going to be dragging these blocks in, but in the very next episode, we're going to be writing our own lines of code. We went over this before as well, but each of these is called a function. So movie equals video is called a function, color invert is a function. I can tell because of these open and closed parentheses. And if I drag in tint, that's a function as well. So what did tint do? Tint made my video red. What if I wanted it to be a different color? Well, I could type in a different color here, or I could click on this color, and you know it's clickable because my little pointer came up. And this really cool color picker shows up, and I can choose any color that I want. And I see it update here. This is called a hex color. Now the second number is a little different. This first color, or this first string that I'm passing in is just what color the video is. But the second one is how extreme that color is. If I'm ever not sure what an effect does, a really easy way to test is to make this a really low number, like 5, and then to make it a really high number, like 100. And that'll give me a pretty good idea of what it does. When it's at 5, I hardly see it. It looks a little bit different. When it's at 100, it's blocking everything. It's all I can see is that color. I'm going to choose something in the middle. I'm going to choose 65, but you can choose whatever color you want. If you decide that you don't want a line of code, if you don't want it to be inverted anymore, for example, you can just delete that line of code and it'll go away. Another option, I'll drag tint in again, is to press Command Z or Control Z, depending on if you're on a Mac or PC or Chromebook, and that'll undo whatever you did before. So I'm on a Mac, so if I type in yellow and change my mind, no, I want it to be red, I can undo it really easily by pressing Command Z. And it'll undo it and bring back what I had before. So now that I'm on step 6 out of 13, I have a few more effects I can play around with here. So let's check them out and see what they do. I'll start from a blank text editor, and the first thing I'll do is drag in black and white. That's pretty cool. I might keep that. Since I want to try these out one at a time, if I decide to keep one, something I can do to not delete it but not have it affect my video is to do something called comment it out. Programmers write comments all the time to tell other people what's happening in their code, to write them notes to come back to later, or to stop code from working if they're testing to see why something's broken, or if they just want to run it without that line of code. So here I can write 2 slashes just like that. Make that a little bit bigger for you all. And it'll stop that line of code from working. So watch that again. If I delete these, it'll be black and white. If I write 2 slashes, it comments them out, and my line of code is still here. I can bring it back, but it goes away. Let's try grayscale. This doesn't have any arguments getting passed in, so I can't make it more or less grayscale. It's only this one thing. And then we also have kaleidoscope. Kaleidoscope's cool. Kaleidoscope is pretty extreme. We can change this number to change like the amount of sides my kaleidoscope has. If I make it a really high number, it just looks like a circle, which is also kind of cool. But I don't really want to lose my bridge, my little archway, my road. So I'm actually not going to use kaleidoscope here. But you're welcome to in your project. So now that I'm on step 7 out of 13, we have, I think, all of the effects that we're going to have. So now you can combine each block to mix and match and make your own filter. So let's choose 3 or 4 filters that we really like here. I'm going to keep black and white. I like the way that looks on this video. I'm also going to add vignette, which is going to give me this nice border effect. It's a little bit too extreme for me. I think I'm going to make it 10 instead. There we go, that looks nice. Exposure will make something lighter. You can tell again if I make it 100, it makes my video really bright. It's actually a bit hard to see with the black and white, but I'll get rid of that. There we go, so like at 1, it's really dark, at 100 it's really bright. Blur is going to blur my video. Kind of make it look like my lens is dirty or I'm underwater. And then noise is going to add all of this noise on top of my video, like I'm watching an old TV. It's kind of crazy. Pixelate is a really cool effect here. So this is the last new effect that we have. And this adds pixelation. If I get rid of one of the numbers, it gets less pixely. If I make it a really big number, my pixels get huge. It caps out at 100. So I have these really big pixels. My project gets kind of abstract. It's more of the idea of a column than a column. So let's see. So I know I'm going to keep black and white. I know I'm going to keep vignette. I think I'm going to keep tint as well. I really like tint. I like that there are 2 options that we can pass in. So I'm going to go ahead and choose blue here. I think I want it to be blue. I'll make it purple. I'll make it purple like VidCode. And then 4. There we go. That looks kind of cool. This is sort of looking like a painting to me, which I really like. Like I feel like at the end right here where you kind of see the background get dark like that, it looks like very much like a painting. The other thing I can do, let's see what happens if I invert this. I don't think I like that. Let's add some noise. I don't want it to be too crazy. Let's add noise at about 10, 25, let's say. There we go. And then let's add some pixelation. Cool. I think we're getting somewhere. So I have 2 lines of code to set my video, and then 5 lines of code to add these video filters. And it's kind of cool because this is similar code to what's behind the video filters that you do use on Photoshop or Instagram, except you can see the code here. And as we get deeper and deeper into programming, you're going to be able to customize more and more things that otherwise you'd have to use out of the box, and eventually make tools for other people to make things. Cool. So we went over passing in values and arguments a little bit. But here, do you see how tint, we talked about this before, we have a color and a number. If you're ever curious what gets passed into a function, VidCode has this special feature where you can click on the function name and it'll give you information about it. So if I click on tint, it'll say tint and then what's getting passed in, so my color and my intensity. If I tried, for example, to take this and move it after 30, it's not going to work. My screen just goes black. And that's because this is supposed to be a color, this is supposed to be a number, and when my program is expecting a string and expecting a number and not getting that, it doesn't know what to do. It just breaks down. So the order of your arguments is really important. The last thing I want to show you is that the order you put your code in matters as well. So this is something called sequencing, and it means that my code is getting read kind of like you would read a book. So the very first thing that's getting read is this movie.source, setting my movie to be a sunset. Then black and white is getting read, then vignette, then tint, then noise, then pixelate. So that means if I move tint, let's say above black and white, my video looks very different. It's not this tint color anymore. Let me change the tint to another color so you can see that more easily. So I'm going to set this to 70 instead of 30 and make it red. So you can see I have this very red project right now. If I take this and move it before black and white, it goes away. And that's because it is getting turned red, but it's getting turned red on line 4. So if we get rid of black and white, we see that it's still red. We bring black and white back, and it goes away. And that's because, like I said, the code is getting read in order here. So for example, if I move tint to the very end, and then drag in grayscale, everything becomes, once again, black and white and gray. If I move grayscale before tint, will it still be red? It will, because tint red is the very last thing that gets called. So go ahead, now that you have all of the options here, now that you know a little bit more about your code, go ahead and make something that looks really, really special to you. You have so many possibilities here, especially now that you know that the different order will make a different project. It's kind of crazy how many different things you can make with this code. There we go. I'm going to move vignette after tint. So I get this border over the purple instead of under it. I'm going to move pixelate after vignette so that my vignette gets pixelated as well. And then I'm going to bring in exposure. Just so you know, in future tutorials, you won't have access to all of these same blocks, but you can always click the reference here and it'll have a library of all of the different functions and their names, so you can always refer to them in future projects. Once you're done with your project, I think this looks pretty good. Let me get this pixely. You can go ahead and submit it, give it a name, and then press View Your Project. Now you have this page where your project lives. If you want to make another version, you can click Edit, and if you want to share it with anyone, your username isn't on here, so you don't have to worry about privacy. You can send them a link to your project, or you can embed it in another website.